And we are back. Ron, this has been eating at me all day. I've been wanting to ask this. So today, Justin Jefferson was asked by our guy, Chris Thomason, about his contract that should come up for discussion in the spring. And he said that he's focused on being the best wide receiver in the league, and he's not too fond of money. And I have searched my memory bank for 3 hours, and I can't remember a superstar athlete ever saying something like that. I've heard them take team-friendly deals, but I've never heard those words come out of their lips. Of course, he'll eventually get a big payday, but well, did this blow your socks off, Ron?
Well, yeah, I saw that. I saw him say that, and especially out of the wide receiver position, you don't typically hear them talk like that because they have that diva mentality. But in a way, maybe he's wise beyond his years as far as when it comes to something like that. I know his brother played, and I think it was if he was drafted in the NFL but never played in the NFL. But I think he just has the mindset of, if I go out there and do my work and show my worth, that part will come. And I think in the younger generation, and yes, now that we're all in that, we're closer to BMAX era than we are this era coming up. You don't see many kids that are like that, where BMAC, you played on that Miami team with 30-something NFL players. So you guys are all in college before the NIL, and all this now, and going out and handling your business. And then everyone went on to, most of them had successful Hall of Fame caliber careers for a lot of them. So what is, from your standpoint, when you hear that, you hear a player kind of say, I'm not worried about money, or I don't like money, I just want to be the best. What is your mindset when you hear that?
To be honest, I think there's just something to be said to make it sound nice and make it seem like that money isn't like, the money is a factor.
Oh, absolutely.
But I definitely think that he wants to just show like his love for the game, or kind of put it out there that he has more of a love for the game than the money. But definitely he's not going to take a low deal either. So money's definitely going to be
right. And that's why I took it as more of like, if I go out there and if I show I am the best, or I'm in that conversation, the money will take care of itself.
Right.
Like the guy, like the top tier guys, they might, if they take a team friendly deal, they're not getting shortchanged. Like, they're still signing these.
James
Every
Harden.
person that signs a new deal is getting, the record deal, right? So he's 22, 23 years old. When he'll be the highest paid receiver, while that'll probably only last a year, because then Jamar Chase's deal will come up, and so on and so forth. So it's not like when, Hutch signed here with the 7 for $49, it's like $7 million a year for an interior lineman. That's unheard of. Now that's chump change.
The weird thing, Ron, is he had the opportunity to say the money will take care of itself, or we'll talk about that when the time comes. But he point blank said, I'm not fond of money. It's like a socialist wide receiver. That's the weird part. Brian, have you ever played with players that are like, yeah, the money isn't my.
Remember, I played with straight cash, homie. So I mean, I don't really know too many people who are going to say, hey, they're not fond of it. But I think I feel like he really was just trying to say, like, express that he has such a love for the game that the money isn't like a big deal to him, but it is a deal situation, but it's not a big deal. Like he loves the game that much.
So it's probably with like he's starting to get some of these endorsement type deals. And now being a left tackle, even though you were one of the better to best left tackles in the game for a while, left tackles, they don't market like they do a wide receiver. So
they should have us like eating like, like
Subways.
Like Subway, or just, like ketchup commercials. We're putting stuff on like hot dogs and hamburgers,
or
like just something.
Why not
food,
like some insurance? Like what better way to have protection?
This fills up, or insurance. I used to always say that too. That the lineman was insurance for the quarterback. Insurance commercials, things like that.
Yeah. It is weird.
I was creative enough to think that.
Yeah.
Mike, you were on the show a couple times last year. Thanks for joining again, sir. How you been?
Not bad. I'm waiting for the Arm & Hammer baking soda, right? Sponsorship, right? That's the money maker right there.
Right.
Let me ask you about Jefferson, sir. So, Mike, I know you were about your money. It's this. If you tried to write in a movie screenplay the best possible thing you could hear from a superstar player's mouth, this would be it. Like, essentially saying he didn't express any disgruntlement with the team, said he doesn't fond of money. how long until this gets reeled back, or do you think that it'll just be a nothing burger when his contract talks come up and boom, he signs?
Yeah, I think there's certain athletes that have the political correctness down, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say exactly what should be said. And I think Justin Jefferson is one of those athletes. And then you have the other athletes that just probably to the team's chagrin speak from the heart and say things that their team's trying to backpedal on and is newsworthy and soundbite and all that kind of stuff. I don't think you'll ever hear that kind of stuff from Justin Jefferson. I think at the end of the day, to BMAC's point, right? Like he clearly cares about money. He knows he's going to get paid, but he strikes me as the kind of guy that he's not going to come out and say anything that people are going to latch onto those words and make it a big deal, a big distraction for the team.
He's actually almost paranoid about being painted in that light. You'll recall in 2020, a December game against the Bears, he was on a microphone. I think he said, "Fuck, Kirk, throw the ball." And he was frustrated. And of course, the media twisted that as Jefferson doesn't like his quarterback. And he point blank tweeted, "I ain't no diva, don't get it twisted." So I think that he is self-aware that, I don't want to be like one of these prima donnas. And it just so happens that the Vikings have this guy who's like this dream everything, this beacon of, wide receiving yards and touchdowns, and then happens to say these things financially. Now, what I was whispering there, Ron, when you were talking was about James Harden. About 2 weeks ago, he told the 76ers, just pay everybody else whatever's left over, I'll take it, which implies from the headline that he's going to pay for like 2 or 3 million. No, he got 35 million.
No, it was like a 20%.
Yeah,
less, but I mean that's the way the money is in the NBA. But I was gonna say, like back to with Jefferson, you kind of alluded to that game, with the overthrow in the end zone. But I think again, back to his personality, that just seems to who he is. Because go back to his college years when he was on LSU, and that LSU team, in a way would rival Bryant, your Miami team, where just dominant, a lot of NFL talent on that team, obviously Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all these guys. But when he was at LSU, he wasn't the number one guy. It was Jamar Chase, and even Terrace Marshall was essentially that number 2 guy. So I think that just comes with when you go, and Brian, you probably had a lot to say with this too. When you go to a program, when you are like that, like when you were in Miami, like they were a bigger draw than the Dolphins, and LSU in their run, they were a bigger draw than New Orleans at the time. So is there something that comes with that where when you are the priority in that area or in that market, like you kind of develop those NFL like habits before you get to the league? Is that something that helped you out a lot?
I mean, what helped us out a lot is we had a lot of guys who were already in the league coming back and kind of schooling us on how things were operated too. So I'm not sure if they had that or not, but and so we used that to kind of give us an idea how to, kind of run the team and make sure all the players were accountable for each other. So I don't know if they have that or not, but I mean, just being on the team, I feel like for him and him not being the number one guy, he was around those guys, those other guys who were, and he probably watched how they interact and moved, and now he just took that personality and brought it here in Minnesota.
BMAC, switching topics here. The Adrian Peterson Le'Veon Bell fight was postponed because some other main event didn't flush out. And I want to get your honest opinion. Do you think this fight ever happens now?
I think so. So I'm pretty sure they both been training and they don't want it to go in vain. And I'm pretty sure they're both still up to doing it. So
okay,
I think it'll happen. They'll just change the date. They'll train a little longer, but they'll change the date. It'll happen.
Yeah, I think that the promoter said that tentatively targeting September, and it just assumes that neither player will sign with a football team. So it can happen. But I read speculation that this would be the type of thing that would derail the fight altogether. Especially if Hart wasn't in it. And so I just wanted to get your take. But yeah, if you say you think it'll probably happen, it's something to look forward to.
Did you get a chance to catch up with Adrian? I know you a couple weeks ago you said that.
Yeah, because he was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and then I totally forgot to reach out to him this week, so I haven't talked to him.
Because before the fight was called off, Le'Veon, like I saw a headline or whatever where he came out and said that he's putting football aside and he's focusing strictly on this fight. Because again, I'm sure the different types of training that you have to do, like it's not like taking a pounding like a running back. It's now you got to be more finesse, let's say. So I mean, it was interesting when I heard that because he is the younger of the two backs who took a year off, at his peak. So it seems like he has a little more tread on the tires than Adrian at 35, 36, or whatever it is, just normal wear and tear as a running back. So I thought it was interesting when he said that, and then the fight gets called off, and now it's like, or postponed. So I still want to see it. I want to see it.
I do too.
Yeah.
So Brian,
you were going to be in LA too. Now put some damper in your.
Yeah, I leave on Sunday for LA.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I've heard rumblings that BMAC is fighting somebody. I don't know if that's legit or if that's
They're trying to sign me up to get Shaq to fight.
You're kidding, right? Are you kidding or are you being for real?
No, I'm joking.
Oh, I was like, oh my goodness, we got to see this. So tell us about your trip. So Sunday you head for the show. Tell us about it, sir.
Yeah, so Sunday I head back out to LA for America's Got Talent, and we're out there. I'm out there at least till the 11th, and we start back filming for that. So I'm out there for about 2 weeks. Get ready for, I guess, different rounds of America's Got Talent. So.
Wow, I thought it was a couple days, but 2 weeks is no joke.
Yeah, they actually was trying to get some of us to come today, but it was like last minute to ask a group of us come today. So for the most part, we'll all come in on Saturday and Sunday, and we start rehearsing and everything on Monday.
Wonderful. All right. So do you think you'll be able to join next Wednesday, or is that up in the air?
What time is it? I should be able to. Our days, I know when I get there on Monday, I know our schedule. So I should be able to because it'll be 6:30 there. So yeah, I should be able to.
Cool.
You did set the precedent too, because you did call in when you were on Love and Hip Hop in Miami.
Yeah, I did. I had to go in the car.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome.
I don't recall the days being that long. From the last time we were there, I don't recall us still being at 6:30. Well, I mean, I would just let them know that I have, something at 6:30.
Yeah.
Remind me, because the time difference too, it throws me off.
Yeah, I just got back from Hawaii, and that's 5-hour difference, and that was
Right.
weird. That was weird with the first 2 days there. Oh my God, it was weird. You just had to. We ended up as a family going to bed at about 8 or 9 p.m. every night, just because our bodies were like, "All right, it's time."
You're lucky that you weren't there during when sports were going on.
Yeah,
I was there in June of 2013. And when LeBron and Heat were going through the Pacers, that series.
Mm-hmm.
So I, watching basketball at 2 p.m. is in Hawaii was not ideal, but I definitely had to do it. So.
That was the series of Roy Hibbert's life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I remember that vividly. All right, Mike, let's we haven't talked to you, like I said, for about a year. So we don't have any of your takes on Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. So we're going to get to those in the next 45 minutes. So I'm going to start. Since you sit adjacent to me at all of these Vikings games and have done so for 5 years, I know that you've been a somewhat frequent critic about how the Vikings offense would get boring or vanilla or do the same shit. And I don't think that's on the docket now because this coach is an offense first thinker. So I want to ask you, what are you most expecting to be different about this O'Connell offense from the Zimmer offense of the past 8 years?
Yeah, no, I'm actually super excited. I think a couple of words come to my mind: creativity, unpredictable. You probably got sick and tired of hearing me say that, right, during the games. But honestly, when I was thinking about like O'Connell, obviously the jury's still out for him as a head coach, but I'm hopeful that when you look at coaches like Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Sean Payton, right, where it's like creativity, full usage of the offense, same formation, different outcomes, all that stuff that I feel like has been lacking from us. I'm hopeful that will come, right? I mean, Dalvin in the flat, right? I've said that a million times, right? You use the running backs, Irv coming back. I'm just thinking unpredictable, right? I just felt like defenses knew to a degree kind of where our go-to plays were. Mm-hmm. And we had a ton of talent, but why were we never able to get over that edge, right? So that if you never know what's coming, you never know the formation looks the same, and as a defense, you don't know what's coming. I think that's when you're scary as a team. So I'm hopeful that's where we'll be.
Creativity and unpredictability. Ron, so I'll tell you mine is just utilizing and emphasizing WR3s and WR4s like the rest of the world, because It was an absolute dream that KJ Osborne finally, in Zimmer's 8th year, became a WR3 that was used and was dependable. And I want that solidified for the rest of time. And then I want a WR4 to be something like just more than just, Chad Beebe or some anonymous person. Ron, what is your biggest change you expect to see, or what you're most looking forward to about the new offense?
Well, I think Mike nailed it on the head, and I'll go even a step further with that. Is not just plays with different outcomes that defenses seem to know what was coming. Philosophically, it seemed like we were very to the book on everything, like a new blackjack player sitting at the table and looking at the card. What do you do on this play? What do you do on the, like, it was run on first down. If you get 3 or more yards, then it's a pass, and like, just again, very vanilla. So that's what I'm looking forward to, rather than just the motion and all that type of stuff. Just hey, if it's 2nd and 18, you're not just going to do a draw play or a screen play just to get some yards back. Maybe you take a shot and do a deep in or something, because you have weapons on the outside that can get open. And then also, Dustin, to your point, with the depth at wide receiver, where one of the things I think is actually one of Kirk's biggest faults in my mind is the way he goes through progressions. He's almost too meticulous. It's never an ad lib, like, oh, this guy's covered up here, I'm gonna go to this side because that's what I see on film or whatnot. It's more so, okay, here's read 1, read 2, read 3, and when you don't have the offensive line in front to protect, that's when he seemingly gets in trouble and takes a sack. So granted, I think a lot of that might have been more of the hamstrungness from Mike Zimmer and what he allows. I know people still like to bitch and moan like he doesn't call audibles or whatnot. Well, I don't think he was given that freedom to do so. And I think that's the one thing I'd like to see the Kirk, take that next step. While I still think he's an above average starter, and I'd put him in that same Stafford tier of quarterbacks. But I think he has the capability to have games where he looks elite, but he has to do that in going through these progressions. And I think having the freedom on offense is what I'm looking forward to the most. It's, hey, we as fans sitting there can all see, hey, they're playing the inside slant. Let's check out of that and go to a fade or something outside, back shoulder, whatnot. Because he can make every single throw in the book. Jefferson can run every route. Thielen doesn't drop a thing. So I'd like to see the players utilized to their strengths, where the last few years doesn't seem to be the case. Unless you're CJ Ham. He was used to his strength a lot.
Yeah, hey, Dustin, real quick, right? So I lived over in Europe last year, right? And I literally remember I'm sitting in this guy's bar that I got to know really well, and I hooked up my laptop to their big screen, and we're watching a Vikings game, right? And I remember calling the plays because we were so predictable. I was like, they didn't understand American football. I'm like, watch, here's what's going to happen, right? And I'm like, dude, if some no-name guy sitting in Albania can call the plays,
literally in Albania,
right? Like, how can a certified NFL defensive coordinator not know what's coming? And that's where it just got super frustrating.
Oh, I agree, Ron. I think on the trigger shyness from Cousins, I think we're going to have a referendum this year, because I'm pretty sure Cousins is even on record saying that he's a little paranoid about turning the ball over. And we're going to find out this year if that is an inherent personality trait or if that was derived from Zimmer, because there were times, like the Pittsburgh game came to mind, where he had a little gunslinger, like yep, he's just going to fling it. And I hope that somebody will tell him, like, hey, if you throw 14 interceptions, but you also throw 42 touchdown passes, nobody's going to care. And I think Cousins is either in his DNA a little hesitant to force it and get an interception, or that was the Zimmer thing, who was saying, God damn it, don't you turn the ball over. And I think we're going to find out with O'Connell, who will presumably preach this gunslinging mentality, who was to blame there, because Cousins seems like the kind of guy that would be a little shy about, fucking up.
What's his take, though? Like, I don't remember him back at Michigan State, Washington. Like, did he have a little wing it factor there, or has he always been this way?
He did in Washington. That's what I was going to say, because, Washington also, they threw it a ton.
Yeah.
But he had his interceptions, but Granted, he was throwing to Pierre Garcon, Deshaun Jackson, like Jameson Crowder, like these type of guys where they're not on Justin Jefferson's level. So I think he had a little bit more of that just stylistically. But yeah, I think Dustin, you nailed it. Zimmer, the one thing he says every press conference is limit turnovers. Like it's limit turnovers, and I think third down defense were always the two things they would always talk about.
And they're always good at those things. It's weird.
Exactly. And so I think now I don't want Kirk to go out there and be Jameis Winston and be 30-30, but I want to see him like, in the good old Randy Moss days where dude's gonna be open. Like I don't care if he's getting the ball every other play. It's you still got to stop him from getting the ball. Like who cares? So and Kirk is again he's proven to be a very accurate quarterback who can make every single throw. So assuming the protection in front of him is adequate, we have the weapons on offense to really do some damage. And so I would love to see him go out there and just pedal to the metal and hey, we're gonna air it out. And if
give me a little Culpepper, right? Give me a little Culpepper action in there. Yeah,
I would. And if Kirk throws a touchdown pass and gets his roll on, I would love it. just let him bring that swag back, and and go big timers on it and call it a day.
Raun, the weird thing about a baseline here is that Zimmer never had bad seasons. He always had, when they were bad, they were mediocre. 8-9, 7-9, 8-7-1. Even when we felt the team was bad, which means 7-9, they were still at the top of the league in fewest turnovers and third down defensive conversion percentage. They were still good at those things. So I think his message sunk in. But while the rest of the NFL was passing him by and, leaving the Vikings in mediocrity, he hung his hat on those things probably too much, in that conservative mindset that Mike talked about on offense. Brian,
it's almost like pivoting. I was going to pivot to Brian kind of on that same thing. You played kind of with with your Vikings early in your career with that. Hey, we're going to outscore everyone because we got Culpepper, Moss, and the guys. And then the later in your career, you were kind of on the opposite, where when we had Ed Reed on, and he basically said, just if every possession needs to end in a kick, whether that's a field goal or extra point or a punt, there's no turnovers. Like from an offensive lineman's perspective, which one did you have more fun playing in, the let it roll or the one that, hey, we just have to limit mistakes?
Let it roll because that get me off the field faster. You could be like going the 35-yard line, and then Randy would say something called like picking peanuts was like a little thing he would say. That means he was going to catch it off the top of the defender's head. Dante just got to throw it up. And once you heard that, I was like, okay, just hold your block. Like, what I'm saying? My part. And because that means that we're going deep and just try to hold your block a little longer, like extra longer, because he needs more time. So whenever I heard like that conversation in the huddle, I knew it was a high chance to get off the field, and go down there and kick a field goal. So, and it was more, I feel like it was more exciting too for fans too, to see like big plays and things like that happen instead of marching down the field and then settling with a field goal,
Right.
I think I've asked you this before way back when, so when Raun was talking about the Moss era, they were unabashedly a pass first team. They even called it the ratio. And then Adrian came along in 2007. And for a couple of years there before Favre joined, it was more run. Did your job description change? Did you have to change how you played, or was it pretty much the same, just with different focuses on offense?
I used the opportunity when it was more run is to be more physical in the run to wear down the pass rusher. So I didn't mind that, especially on the away games. I didn't mind. Like, we had to stay ahead. Like, you don't want to get behind, because if you get behind on the away game, you're just throwing. But, I would use the opportunity, especially if it was a good pass rusher, to just use my weight and just lean into him and just keep colliding to wear him out, So I didn't mind that either. But I just knew, just some big plays, like with Moss, you could just take a couple big plays here and there and you're down the field faster. But with Adrian, though, Adrian would get big yardage. He would get big gashes as well, too, so on the land, too. So it was kind of different. Imagine having both of them.
That's amazing. So actually, that brings up a good point. So obviously you played in those eras with both of them at the Metrodome, which was notoriously loud. From when you were on the field, which one had a bigger cheer when they were free? Because you know what I mean? Like, as a fan, because you're watching, because when the ball's in the air and it's going to Moss, like, the cheers start. But then when Adrian had the ball, like, you kind of knew also, like, he's got something there.
It was different because for Moss, it was like a lot of times people automatically knew once they seen like a pass going, they was already screaming. But for Adrian, it's like a buildup of a scream, like, I feel like
right,
type of thing. So it was like two different like sounds almost.
It was like the Moss one, like when you hear the loud
sense.
scream, you can kind of let off. When the Adrian
okay, he's about to catch the ball. Like, he wasn't even caught it yet, but they was already screaming like they could just probably see the separation between him and the DB or something. So they already knew, like, he's going to catch this. And then with Adrian, it was like,
Did you ever catch yourself, like, as the cheers are getting louder, to look upfield, like, and then kind of be a fan, like, of like wanting to watch them?
I watched a lot. That was the problem. I watched, because sometimes you can just tell, like, he's going for a touchdown. So I was like, you watching? I did watch a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure those films.
Maybe you watch the downfield, like, okay, man, I'm just watching. You're so far away from me. There's nothing I can do, like, way back there.
All right, Mike. So next topic is Kyle Rudolph, who was in the Vikings rumor mill for about 6, 7, 8 weeks, potentially reuniting with the Vikings because he said he would like to come back. He didn't do that. He went to go play with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers and wisely chasing Super Bowl rings as his career starts to tick down. So I came up with this idea. Obvious fact, Stephon Diggs plays for the Bills, and these are the two top teams per odds makers to reach and win the Super Bowl. So, Mike, who gets Super Bowl ring first, if any? Kyle Rudolph in Tampa or Stephon Diggs in Buffalo?
Oh, man, I would love to see Rudy get a ring just in general. And I think, for me personally, I think I'd go Diggs, and here's why, right? I think Josh Allen is the guy that makes everybody better. I think Brady is clearly that guy, but it's got to be coming to the end with him, right? I just feel like everything, for teams to win championships, like, everything has to go right, including having some luck in there. And I just think, it went well for Brady that first year in Tampa. They got it, but I just don't see that happening. I don't see everything lining up and going right for that. Whereas I think Buffalo is, probably a team that's going to have their way with a lot of teams this year. So I think if it comes down to me to answer that question, I would say who's going to get the ring first, Allen or Brady, right? And I would go Allen on that. So I think Diggs is going to get his ring.
Okay, Ron, Rudolph or Diggs? Who gets the hardware first, if any?
So I would lean because it's either going to be this year or not really for the Bucs, I think. So for one of the main reasons I lean Bucs, because the NFC is more wide open, or not. It's more wide open in the fact that there aren't as many top heavy teams in the NFC that there are in the AFC. And granted, both of those teams are going to be running through weak divisions, really. I mean, Patriots, sure, they had a solid year, but the Jets are the Jets, and the Dolphins, Tua still has to show a lot. Like, they have a track team on the field, but let's see if Tua can take that step. And then the Falcons are going to be bottom feeders. The Panthers, Matt Rule is not an NFL coach, and Jameis Winston's the quarterback in New Orleans. So nothing against him, but he's going to throw his picks. So I think the Bucs will have a easier path. And then the other part of it is Buffalo, I think, will likely get either one of those top 2 seeds, so they'll have home field advantage, and that will actually, I think, be a detriment to Buffalo because, we saw that game last year against New England when Mac Jones threw it 3 times or whatever. It's Buffalo conditions are going to be difficult to play in, and until they get a running game that's not Josh Allen, I don't trust them because Josh Allen still has those inaccuracies to him. While I do think he is that guy that can elevate a team, I think he has faults in his game that they don't have complements to make up for. Cook is obviously, I think, going to be a good receiving back, but they don't have that guy that you can hand it to and let him churn some clock. and that's going to keep their defense on the field, get them tired, and they still have to go through either a Mahomes-led team or like that AFC West is going to be tough. So I think the Bucks have the better shot.
Yeah, every team in the AFC this year and probably next year will have to go through Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Bill Belichick, and
Joe
Josh
Burrow.
Allen and Joe Burrow. And what is that? About 9 or 10. So yeah, I think on sheer top heaviness, Brady probably has a better path to get there. But I also Bleav, because I'm not a fool, in that Brady magic, that son of a bitch always, like, every other year they get some capacity, he gets there. Just finds a way.
Every year it's like like age is gonna, like, I'm in my mid-30s and age hits me on a regular basis, and I sit at a desk all day. Like, I'm not 45 throwing a football getting hit by 300 pounders. So I'm sure it'll be one of those where, like, kind of like Ben Roethlisberger was, where all of a sudden age hit him and he couldn't throw the ball. Like, he couldn't throw the ball downfield like he once could. So, but with him, it's like, well, it's not this year. Maybe it'll be next year. But then the other thing with those teams, you said, all those teams that have the top heavy in the AFC, they also have really good defenses. The Chargers, the Raiders, like the NFC, the top heavy teams, the Packers, their defense isn't very good. I mean, like, realistically, like, there's not any elite defenses in the NFC that have the quarterbacks to match.
I think Brady just came back because he was pissed off that somebody else leaked his retirement, right? He strikes me as a guy that he's got to control every single thing that happens, not only in his life, but on the planet. And the fact that somebody else said he's retiring, he's like, you know what, whatever, I'm bringing it back, right? I'm bringing it back because then I'm going to say I'm retire. I don't know. I agree with you. The AFC is very top heavy, and that's going to be a tougher path. I don't. And maybe I'm the idiot betting against Brady here, right? But I don't think it's going to all come together.
I think the other factor is Bruce Arians. I don't think him and I don't know. I'm not saying it was Cousins or Cousins Zimmer like, but I don't think they got along. And I think once like, it was kind of like, you can either have Arians or me, and they clearly were like, well, we'd rather have Tom Brady and Todd Bowles than Arians and whoever, Kyle Trask.
Yeah, when you were talking about Roethlisberger, Ron, the same thing also happened to Peyton Manning, but nobody cared because his defense was so good that they still won a Super Bowl. But he was atrocious in that season. Yeah. He was a bad quarterback. It was almost like Dilfer, but you couldn't say it out loud because they kept winning. And even Osweiler was winning with them and kept that season afloat. But Manning,
even Breeze, the last couple of years, like before he retired, like, people did not want to admit Breeze is cooked. Yeah. Like, his deep ball was no longer, when they're bringing Taysom Hill to throw deep balls, when that's a terrible decision anyways, because all he does is either run for a lot of yards or throw an interception. Like, when he's throwing the deep balls, the coach knows that Breeze is cooked. Like, and I'm not nothing against it, because being a quarterback in the NFL obviously is difficult as it is, but then when you lose that arm, like, that arm strength and everything that you're used to, like, like the fact that Brady's able to every year after year show like that durability and like weathering time, like, he sold his soul to the devil somewhere, and it's
he's gonna be
no. It's the avocado toast, man. Like, it's just
he's gonna be 45 here next month, or actually about a couple weeks.
That's crazy.
It's wild.
That's
Bryant, Bills or Bucks if you had to choose to win the Super Bowl?
The Bucks, they just added like another great player too.
Julio.
Yeah, and I feel like they really like, he's like almost like the GM of Tom Brady. He tells them what he needs, and they go out and they get it, and then he's able to get them to where they need to get to. So I feel like adding Julio Jones, as long as he stays healthy, I feel like that's a great addition to the team. That gives him another weapon. So and when you have a player like that, just like how I said when we had Brett Favre the first year, all the guys around him like look up to him, and they raise their level of play up. And I feel like they'll do that again. And especially adding Julio Jones, he'll be excited to be there as well too. So I can see this. I can see them getting further if they don't win. I can see them getting further.
Yeah, Julio Jones went from bottom rung of the ladder in terms of fantasy football projection, overall projection, to about middle of it to the top. Not all the way to the top, but we would just kind of written him off for dead. Oh, he'll sign on with the Texans or Bears, something like irrelevant like that, and finish out his career. But now all of a sudden back with Brady, it's like, oh, okay, if there was one human walking the earth that can extrapolate more greatness from Julio, bada bing, you've got it with the Bucs.
And it's Julio not getting the wide receiver one attention. Like he's still a dynamic player. He's still that physical freak. He showed last year, while he didn't string it together for a full season, he showed last year his big playmaking ability in spurts, and he's still that dude. I wouldn't want to face him.
Is there any risk of him being the AJ Green factor, right?
There obviously, always is. And they same draft class, but again, if you're like, even with AJ Green, if you look at his, and not talking fantasy wise, because I think obviously he'll have his games that are blow up, but if you look at just in terms of football, he's their wide receiver 3 when Godwin's healthy, because Godwin is still that slot guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're telling Tom Brady that he has Mike Evans, Godwin, and then now ancillary pieces are Kyle Rudolph and his great red zone threat, and Julio Jones. Like, again, a guy who's just a dynamic, who breaks tackles, does it in the run game and everything. So he's a satellite piece now, and that'll help him at his, again, old age. What is he, 32?
And Russell Gage too. It's wild how deep they're, and they're to the point with the Julio edition makes it so that if something happens to Evans or a good one, it's like, who cares?
Right.
And they got an extra fullback in Leonard Fournette, so
a tight end, all right, this one blew my socks off. I couldn't believe it. So I write and edit for VikingsTerritory.com, and I think sometime last year I found a dude who writes about the Twins named Ted Schwerzler. He writes for Twins Daily, and he also now writes about the Vikings a little bit on our website. He had an article in my queue that talked about Kevin O'Connell having the top odds at a Bovada sports book to win Coach of the Year. And I was like, oh God, I'm not going to be able to publish this because I thought it was misinformation. I was like, wow. And so I went to Bovada.com or whatever it is. And sure enough, plus 1,200 odds, Kevin O'Connell is the front runner to win Coach of the Year. Now, for some reason, this sports book is not biased, because sports books, I don't think get biased, but it's skewed towards first-year coaches or young coaches. Brandon Staley, I think, was second. So, Mike, does this surprise you that Kevin O'Connell would be the leader of the pack with the lowest odds or highest odds, depending on how you want to interpret that, to win the Coach of the Year award?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think sometimes when you think of Coach of the Year, you're looking at either somebody that maybe wins a division that they weren't projected to, or has a massive turnaround, right? So when I think about, it doesn't even have to be first-year coaches, right? But when you think about some of the teams that might have that opportunity, I'm looking at, okay, which teams made some splash noise over the summer, right? I think of Denver, potentially, right? I mean, they were, I think I looked earlier, 7-6-11 or 7-10 or something last year, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an opportunity if Russ comes in. I know that's a tough division there, right? But if he comes in, all of a sudden they're going 11-6 or 12-5 or something like that. He's probably up for it. I think when you look at Miami, just the talent they have on paper, right? I know they were right around 500 last year. But that's outside of, Ron, to your point earlier, outside of Buffalo, that's fairly easy division, right? So if all of a sudden they surprise, Buffalo implodes, has injuries, something like that, and they make a name for themselves, I could see somebody like that. But I do think when you look at the Vikings, I mean, a couple things, right? I think we severely underachieved last year, injuries galore, right? And so just the sheer fact that everybody's healthy, you have a new change of regime, you have a new philosophy, people are back together. I mean, it just has to go higher, right? Just by default. And then if things click, I think the Packers are vulnerable, right? I think we probably, out of all those three teams I mentioned, I think we probably have the best shot to win the division. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you come in first year, new system, and you win the division in against the Packers, right? Whether they're there or not, I mean, they're still the Packers. I think that would be hard to beat for some other coaches. So it doesn't shock me. It'll be interesting to see if it plays out.
I think it shocked me, Ron, because Pro Football Network, I don't know if you ever read any of their stuff. Aaron Wilson, good dude, writes a lot there. For some reason or another, they ranked all NFL coaches back in June, including first-year coaches, and number 32 on the list was Kevin O'Connell. And I guess I took that to heart. In their defense, like all the first-year coaches were at the very bottom. It just so happened that KOC was very last. So I guess I shouldn't have taken that to heart, but ultimately I did. And so when I saw this, I thought it was poppycock. But no, the Bovada Sportsbook lists Kevin O'Connell with 1,200 as the money line, Brandon Staley 1,400, Brian Dable 1,500, Nathaniel Hackett 1,600, and Mike McDaniel 1,600. So I think for this to come to fruition for the Vikings and O'Connell, they'd probably have to finish at least 12-5, and to Mike's point, win the division. Does this knock your socks off at all?
It doesn't, in the sense that, like Mike said, it's the teams that look to make a jump. Like, I mean, what was our record last year? We have 8 or 9 wins. But either way, right around
8 and 9.
Yep. Okay, so 8 wins. So even if they improve by 3, now that's a new regime winning an extra 3 games with essentially the same offense. I mean, so that literally is just the only change. So I can see it from that perspective, but then also you look at the other coaches who you might think would be favorites for that, whether it's the LaFleur or Shanahan or whatever. The expectations that they have are a lot higher than what the Vikings would have. Like, LaFleur's won 13 games every year he's been in the league, so if he wins 11, that's not a coach of the year warrant. Like, I mean, while it's still a good year and while it could still win the division, you're not as good as you were last year.
This is why Belichick never wins it.
Exactly. Like, the expectations of it, like, where if like there are coaches out there who keep their, like, in a way, Zimmer did it a lot where he kept teams afloat, like back through the Ponder years and even like the run that he had with Keenum. But then also you could argue is the reason that it held them back at times as well. So kind of like you look at Frank Reich in Indianapolis, they have a good team, but there were times where it looks like he held them back because you have 28 in the backfield, but you're letting Wentz air it out. So, so those coaches that, again, that would be expected to be quote unquote the best coaches in the league, the Andy Reids, those type of guys, the expectations for them, if they don't get to 13 wins, they're not going to be in that running. So, the massive turnaround or just that extra catapult into that next moving the team to the next level, the Vikings are that team that's right on the cusp of being able to knock on that door of being a playoff contender where some of those other teams might not be.
And when's the last time you saw a coach of the year winner from an already good team?
Yeah,
to your point.
I have to go. Yeah, it's usually a comeback player of the year award, but for coaches and comeback system. Yeah. What you're talking about, Ron, or what I mentioned with Belichick, or what you said with LaFleur, always 13-3. It's the same thing that's happened to LeBron. He hasn't won the MVP in the NBA since 2013, and that's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, really, 10 years. 10 years, you can always find somebody different. It's bullshit, but we're just so accustomed to it that we're like, he doesn't need it.
Take the advantage, or you take the greatness for granted.
Yeah.
And it becomes an expectation, especially when you've been doing it for that long. So whether that's a coach or anything else, it's you have to be able to repeat it, but you have to be able to improve on it. Sustained success is not a given for coach of the year.
I use this analogy a lot, but it's the same thing when you walk out of a Tom Hanks movie. You never turn to your wife or girlfriend and be like, God, Tom Hanks was good in that. That's just the way it is from now on. Yep.
It's expected. Yep.
Bryant, talking about this coaching change from Zimmer to O'Connell. If you'll recall, in 2005, after Dante Culpepper got hurt, he never played for the Vikings again, and they ended up getting a new coach. So do you remember from the back half of 2005 to the 2006 season, could you feel a real difference between Tice and Childress and how the team felt and played, or was it kind of more of the same?
No, it was a difference. You could tell it was a difference based on some of the players that we had come on here and speak on both coaches.
Yeah.
Coach Childress, it took some getting used to. and just like I guess his style was different from Coach Tice as well. Coach Tice, we all knew was a player as well, so we looked at him as somebody who kind of knew what we were going through, knew when to back things off. I think Coach Church was more like this numbers guy, didn't really think about like how players felt, like, you know, and it was just two different styles of coaching. And it probably took people a little longer or never to buy into Coach Childress. And that's probably why we had the best season when we had Brett Favre coming, because everybody bought into Brett Favre.
Yeah, I think on
to be honest, I don't even know Brett Favre bought into Coach Childress. Brett Favre kind of was running his own thing. Like, remember, I told you different stories of him changing plays while we were out there on the field. Like, I don't even know if he fully bought into it.
You can see it as a fan. It was Brett's team. It was
yeah, I mean, I could definitely say that was Brett's team. So, and he kind of brought everybody together. So that was, I mean, it's a big difference.
I think when we reminisce, and we even talked to Tice last year, I think we call him and you call him the players coach, and that's accurate, but I think he was just ahead of his curve. I think he would fit in marvelously if you could transplant him at age 40, blah, 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 into now, because this is what they are. And if they're not players coaches, they're assholes. That's just the way we think of them now. It's kind of weird that Tice was ahead of his time. All right, last topic of the night, because we have officially embarked on Vikings training camp. Rookies reported on Sunday. Everybody else showed up yesterday, and they did some on-the-field stuff today, and Andrew Booth headlined things, it seems. So I'll start with Mike. Both Paul Allen, voice of the Vikings, and his broadcast partner, former linebacker Pete Bursich, separate interviews, nominated Jalen Nailor as the surprise camp player. And I think Paul Allen even said he could win WR3. And I'm looking around going, what? But I want to know, does the Nailor steam surprise you at all? Or who would you pick for your surprise camp player, Mike?
So I'm very intrigued with him, but I'm cautiously intrigued, right? Because he doesn't, or at least he didn't display blazing speed in the combine. Is he much more than 6 feet? He's got to be right around there, right? So, you know, which is not super tall for receivers. And if you're not super tall, usually it's your ability to get open or have blazing speed. And combine said he doesn't have that, right? I was reading some stuff that says he's known for his ability to route run and get open, which
big
Kirk is going to love that, right? Because he, to your point, Ron, earlier, he's super methodical with his progressions and so forth, right? So if you're open, Kirk's going to find you. I worry with his size. If he doesn't have breakaway speed, is he going to be effective? Is he going to catch some balls? Yeah, but with NFL cornerbacks, NFL defenses, and what have you, different than college, right? Is he going to is a niche going to be carved out? I hope so. To your point earlier, Dustin, I would love for us to have an awesome WR3 that is a great route runner, that gets open, that moves the chains, takes pressure off, so that we don't know it's always going to, you know, Justin or Adam. So I don't know. I'm curious, cautiously optimistic to see him in training camp.
Yeah, Ron, Jalen ran a 4.5 40, which certainly isn't slow, but with wide receivers, it's not on the upper tier. And so, he was known for big plays. I think it was 18.3 per reception at Kirk's Mater, Michigan State. And it just surprises me that two Vikings voices, literally voices, would mark him. And we talked to him, a month ago, and he seems awesome. But is Nailor your surprise guy? And if not, who is?
Actually, yeah, I do think Nailor would be one of those guys, because the wide receivers, there's always a wide receiver that stands out. You know, last year it was WAP and whatever. But Mike, what I will say this with Nailor, his on-field speed is much faster than his 40 time. I can't recall if he had an injury. I can't remember if we even asked him about it. But I know he had battled injuries his last year in college. But he's a legit track star. He was I think a state champion at Bishop Gorman, which is that essentially like just a charter school in Vegas. I know in watching his play at Michigan State, you know, he has that on-field speed. So, but where I think he's gonna flash is, well, one is returnability. I think he is gonna have the inside track to one of those jobs. but then also his physicality. So yes, he's probably a little more undersized than a lot of receivers, being whatever 6 feet. But one of his profiles that they had coming out of college was he loves the run block. And if you're a team that likes to have multiple wide receivers out there, if you can run block, you're going to find like, especially if Sean McVay's offense is the blueprint for anything that O'Connell does. If you can run block, you're going to find a way on the field. And I think if you can add that element and then be an asset blocking, but then now it's blocking a cornerback, not a linebacker, I think he will flash. The other guy that I think will flash, and this is only going off of what Kwesi was talking about when he drafted him, is the corner. His name slipped my mind.
Caleb.
Yep.
Caleb Evans.
Yep. So because I think he's a guy. He's got the size. I think he's like 6'2" or 6'3", something like that. Clearly has all the measurables. And if your GM is raving about you, that it's keeping you up. It's keeping him up all night watching film. That's going to be a guy where you can see will flash, where it may take a while to translate to on the field in game situation. Like I'll go back to one of my favorite camp players, and I can't remember if this overlapped with your time there, Bryant, or not, but Fearon Wright. If you guys remember that name, I think he was number 66, a special team player. Dude just flew around the field. I think he ended up making the team as a special team guy. But it's a name that no one ever heard of coming in. But you see, he's obviously, making his case, kind of like, Bryant, when you were talking about Anthony Herrera, it's like you get a guy who is looking to make his name in the NFL. So I think you're going to see that out of some of those later round picks rather than, the Ed Ingrams and the early picks, because those are guys that will find their way on the field sooner. But it's going to be those guys that, like, hey, we don't know anything about them, but they want to make their name on this team.
So I will say one thing just real quick. So I live here in Detroit now, right? And so I was actually talking to a buddy of mine at work about this, right? Because Naylor's a Michigan State guy, right? And so my buddy Anthony, who he's a Detroit Lions fan. Most of them don't like to be named, but I'll name him out there, right? Like there's one Detroit Lion fan out there, Anthony Lambert, right? But he was talking about this guy and he likes him, right? And so for whatever that's worth, right? It's a small sample size of one poor sap of a Lions fan, but he said you guys got a good guy there. So we'll see if he lives up to making a WR3.
You're gonna have to send Anthony the link after this, because
I'll have him.
Yeah, he'll
I'll
love
say,
it.
hey, unfortunately, you got a shout out. So I didn't mean for that, right? We don't shout out Lion fans here, but we'll go with it.
All right, B-Mac, you keep us posted for next week on how the AGT goes, and then perhaps we'll see you on Wednesday.
Yeah, you should.
All right, sounds good. Anything else for the group? No. All right.
Good to see you guys again.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining,
Good to
Mike.
see you.
Thanks for joining, Mike.
We'll be back Wednesday to unpack camp, the first week of it, and Skull, baby.